What would you do if the government declared war on your future? In a shocking turn of events, just hours ago, a decree from the Kremlin went out to all border crossings and transport hubs across the nation. The directive is stringent. All young men aged 18 to 30 are now enshrined within the borders of Russia, unable to escape. This isn't merely a travel restriction, it's an unprecedented act of oppression, snatching the hopes of an entire generation. The mastermind behind this drastic measure? The revelation from Kirill Budanov, the head of Ukraine's military intelligence, brought to light a shocking truth: 2 million young Russians are now deemed cannon fodder in a calamitous conflict. As the borders lock tight, panic ripples from Moscow to Vladivostok. But this isn't the display of power it masquerades as. Instead, it's the Kremlin's ultimate act of desperation, ensuring fear reigns, kindling the embers of rebellion that threaten to engulf the regime. This upheaval isn't a spontaneous outbreak, it's the culmination of 3 years of disastrous decisions and relentless deceit. Each lie, a drop of poison infiltrating the nation's core. To fully grasp how the lifeblood of the Russian army, the youth, has been decimated, we must dissect 3 decisive moments that led to this unraveling. The first jarring moment came in September 2022, with the first declaration of partial mobilization. Putin's acknowledgement that the war was spiraling out of control led to a call for 300,000 reservists. That day marked a fracture in the silent agreement between the state and its citizens. The war transformed from a distant spectacle into a palpable threat that could shatter every home. What followed was an astonishing exodus. Nearly 1 million young men abandoned their lives to escape the impending call to arms, forming long lines at the borders with no intent of looking back. The second pivotal moment unfolded between 2023 and 2024, known unsettlingly as the meat grinders phase. Those very reservists were thrust into the blood-soaked ground of the conflict, sent unprepared to the front lines. They faced the most brutal engagements in cities like Bakhmut and Avdiivka. These were victories mired in tragedy. Each grim inch of ground came at the cost of thousands of lives. This relentless cycle of human waves drained the ranks of experienced soldiers and plunged the army into logistical chaos. What remained was an inexperienced force, stripped of its leadership and cohesion. As the echoes of war reverberate through the land, one question persists: how much longer can this fragile empire endure? The declaration of a 2 million-strong mobilization isn't a show of strength, it's the death knell of a regime grasping at straws, willing to sacrifice lives to extend its faltering legacy. The moment is ripe for rebellion, and as the cries of the youth drown out the cacophony of oppression, the stage is set for a confrontation that could change the course of history. In Russia, the recent mass mobilization of young men has sent shockwaves through the nation. Driven by 3 years of turmoil and a cascade of deceit, the Kremlin's drastic actions reveal the dire straits of an entire society caught in a web of fear and manipulation. This chaotic period marks a significant turning point, one that redefines the relationship between the government and its citizens, laying bare the devastating cracks in their once vaunted military machine. To comprehend the crumbling foundation of the Russian army, we must revisit 3 crucial moments that led to its unraveling. The first pivotal moment came in September 2022, when Vladimir Putin faced reality. The illusion of a smoothly running war was shattered. He announced partial mobilization, enlisting 300,000 reservists to fill the gaps left by countless lives lost. This was no mere administrative move. It was a jolt that ripped apart the unspoken agreement between the state and its people. The notion that war was a distant spectacle faded swiftly. Now, it loomed ominously at the doorstep of every Russian family. In an unprecedented wave of desperation, hundreds of thousands of men, estimates suggest nearly 1 million, rushed to flee the country. They clutched their passports tightly, racing toward the border, filling the roads leading to Georgia with long lines of vehicles. This frantic escape was only a preview of the panic to come. On that day, the myth of invincibility surrounding Putin was unraveled, revealing his stark fear of his own people, the very individuals he sought to control. The chaos continued to escalate into 2023 and 2024, during what became known as the meat grinder phase. The once fresh cohort of 300,000 soldiers, thrown into the carnage of urban warfare in places like Bakhmut and Avdiivka, faced a brutal reality. Sent to the front lines with inadequate training and scarce resources, these conscripts were little more than fuel for an insatiable war machine. Each inch of ground claimed in these battles was dearly bought, each victory a mirage gained from the bodies of fallen soldiers. The relentless waves of assault drained the army, erasing the seasoned professionals and skilled non-commissioned officers who were the backbone of the force. Thus, the character of the military transformed. What remained was an untrained assembly of officers and inexperienced recruits, destined for the tragic fate of the front lines. The echoes of their predecessors' sacrifices lingered in the smoky air of forgotten towns. Families now faced a grim reality. Not only were they trapped within their borders, but they were also being compelled into a conflict that would empty their lives of hope and purpose. Infringed upon and desperate, the Russian populace stood at the brink of rebellion. It was no longer merely a fight against foreign adversaries, it had evolved into a battle for their own existence. The melody of defiance sung amid the streets carried a weight far heavier than the notes of tragedy. It was a powerful call to resist, to reclaim a future that no one should have the right to take away. In a series of devastating battles, victories for Russia came at an unimaginable cost. Each inch of territory claimed resulted in thousands of lives lost. Wave after wave of soldiers, sent to the front lines, drained the military of its seasoned professionals and capable non-commissioned officers. This incessant struggle led to a logistical nightmare for the Russian forces. The very backbone of the army crumbled under the debris of feudal urban warfare. What remained were largely inexperienced officers and raw recruits, a desperate mix waiting to be thrust into combat. As the 3-year conflict progressed, the army's human resources dwindled alarmingly. The men called up in September 2022 had been mostly wiped out. All that was left were civilians, ripe for conscription, merely cannon fodder in a rapidly escalating crisis. The Kremlin's call to arms for 2 million reservists signaled not a show of strength, but the final desperate convulsions of a regime that has lost its fighting spirit. This is not some grand military strategy but a frantic attempt to cling to power while sacrificing the very future of its populace. The chilling chants of youthful rebellion ringing through the streets of St. Petersburg resound in stark contrast to the Kremlin's panic-induced actions. With borders closing and young lives threatened, these two developments are two sides of the same grim reality. It represents a perfect storm, a catastrophic miscalculation initiated by Putin, one that threatens to unseat his regime. But why has the Kremlin resorted to such reckless measures? And how far will Vladimir Putin push his own people into the abyss? The answers to these harrowing questions lie in the ruthless arithmetic of failed strategies and the complete unraveling of the Russian military. As the situation intensifies, the once mighty army is now a mere shadow of its former self, and the world watches with bated breath. What will become of a nation that has been turned into a vast prison, where the threat of death looms around every corner? Can rebellion rise from despair, or will the shackles of oppression tighten further? The answers are unfolding in real time, with every passing moment fraught with tension. In a world where desperation intertwines with dread, a generation rises, defiant against a regime threatening to cast them into a furnace of war. The Kremlin has crossed a perilous line, risking its own people's future and trapping them in a vast prison of uncertainty. Why has it come to this? What madness drives Vladimir Putin to wage war not just on Ukraine, but on the very youth of Russia? The heart of this chaos pulses with stark statistics. Over 3 years of conflict have decimated the might of what was once the world's second-largest military. The chilling reality is that this army has evaporated on the Ukrainian front lines, lost amidst the ruins of towns like Bakhmut and Avdiivka. Reports reveal a harrowing truth: Putin's forces are now so depleted that they are scouring the globe for mercenaries, recruiting from impoverished nations like Nepal, Syria, and beyond. What once was a proud superpower is now a beggar, attempting to piece together its military might with foreign lives. In a desperate maneuver, the Kremlin has enacted a draconian law, rushed through the Russian parliament on October 15, 2025. This legislation grants the Ministry of Defense unchecked power to mobilize a staggering 2 million young men. No longer can they travel abroad, those who resist can see their bank accounts frozen, their licenses revoked. This isn't merely recruitment, it's a modern-day enslavement, snuffing out the futures of an entire generation. As the echoes of rebellion rise, a haunting melody fills the streets of St. Petersburg. The young men and women, threatened with a grim fate, resist with art and spirit. The mournful strains of Swan Lake remind them not just of beauty, but of the price of their freedom and the dark history that looms over them. They chant defiantly, they will not serve as disposable pawns in a twisted play for power. Can they break free from the chains of despair? Or will they find themselves caught in an endless cycle of violence and oppression? The stakes grow ever higher as the Kremlin's turmoil spirals into self-destruction, threatening to engulf both the leaders and the led. A revolution is brewing, ignited by fear, desperation, and the fierce will to survive. The cries of a generation echo through the alleys and squares, each note a promise: they will not be thrown into the fire without a fight. As the youth take their stand, how will the regime respond to their bold challenge? The answer may reshape the landscape of power in Russia forever. In a chilling whirlwind, uncertainty grips a nation. The recent military draft has ignited unparalleled fear, especially among the youth. Recruiters prowl campuses, factories, and subway stations, primed to snatch young men from their lives. Families scramble, secretly hiding their sons, desperately seeking false medical excuses to evade this grim fate. Now, thousands seek refuge from this grim manhunt, hiding in dense woods and deserted villages, but with borders locked tight, there's no escape. Those who fled have found safety, while many remain trapped, imprisoned within their country. This wave of mobilization represents not just a military strategy but the harbinger of irreversible havoc. Mobilizing 2 million civilians for what can only be described as a death march destabilizes the military, economy, and society at large. Rather than bolstering the army, this act serves only to cripple it further. Sending untrained, unwilling young men into battle does not reinforce strength, it ensures chaos. Imagine inexperienced workers and students thrust into the front line, armed with outdated weaponry, facing a high-tech military. This is not reinforcement, it's a prelude to slaughter, like tossing a massive target into the sights of articulated death from above. The consequences echo beyond the battlefield. Economically, the decree plunges the country into a cataclysm. Removing the dynamic, innovative youth from their roles in factories and offices spells doom for an economy already gasping for air under external pressures. This maneuver not only halts current production, but it stifles future innovation, leaving Russia's economic pulse weak and faltering. But why would a regime gamble with its future like this? What madness drives them to put their own youth at risk, transforming an entire society into a recruitment ground for an unwinnable war? The truth lies in the painful, stark reality of a military collapsing from neglect, a reality that echoes ominously through the Kremlin's walls. The facade of strength is crumbling, revealing a gaping void where a capable military should stand. What happens next in this disturbing saga? Will the cries of the youth, caught in the crossfire of a regime's desperation, spark a rebellion, or will they simply become pawns in a game where the stakes are their very lives? Only time will tell, as the ground shakes beneath their feet, the fight for their existence looms closer. Imagine the holiday cheer now poisoned by terror. Cheer fading into chaos. Celebrations turning to cries of despair. Victory chants becoming hostage wails. This is no game. This is the brutal howl of a crumbling empire. In the last 48 hours, a stark command from the Kremlin echoed across every border point, airport, and harbor in the Russian Federation. The directive was crystal clear, unforgiving. All males aged 18 to 30 forbidden to exit the country, indefinitely. But it's not mere travel ban. It's a sweeping confinement, shackling an entire generation, Russia's promise seized within its own chains. Vladimir Putin has caged his nation's youth. Picture the cold grip of fear, borders slamming shut like jail doors. The air thick with the stench of betrayal. What madness sparked this frenzy, this sheer desperation? Who is turning the land into a giant, suffocating jail? Dive into this storm with me. In the grip of raw panic, borders locked tight, trapping Russia's future. Young voices silenced, dreams shredded into pieces. The catalyst? A chilling revelations from Kirill Budanov, head of Ukrainian military intelligence, exposed worldwide. Beneath a cloak of partial mobilization, the Kremlin targeted exactly 2 million Russian youths and reservists as fresh meat for the relentless grinder in Ukraine. This blockade? A calculated snare, sealing off escape for the nation's heirs. News ignited panic from Moscow's frozen streets to Vladivostok's windswept ports. But this panic reveals weakness, not might. It's the regime's farewell manifesto, igniting rebellion from dread and flight. Touch the icy dread seeping into veins. Hear the whispered pleas crumbling into shouts. Why unleash such horror on your own blood? Building on terror's groundwork, mobilization scheme to trap millions. Panic morphing rebellion's first spark. Not isolated madness. This descends from 3 shattering blows. 3 chasms in time where Russia's force crumbled. The first fissure, September 2022, partial mobilization announced. Putin confessed, the war's facade shattered. He summoned 300,000 reservists. That instant, the society's silent pact with Kremlin shattered. War morphed from TV spectacle into family invader. Russia's fury exploded, fiercer than foreseen. Historic exodus unfolded, hundreds of thousands, some say nearly 1 million men, snatch passports, cram into cars, crash onto planes, surging toward Georgia's borders in endless lines. Smell the exhaust fumes mingling with sweat of desperation. Feel boots pounding cold earth in frantic marches. This exodus rehearsed today's flight. Trust eroded forever. Putin shone fearing his people before the globe. Could your leader ever cage his own faith? Marching through mobilization's cracks, the 2022 exodus eroding foundations deeply. The second pivot, 2023 to 2024, dubbed the meat grinders phase. Those 300,000 conscripts, hastily trained, ill-equipped, hurled into Ukraine's fiercest infernos, Avdiivka's rubble, Bakhmut's basements. Pyrrhic triumphs bled Russia dry. Each meter of debris cost thousands lives. These wave assaults drained contracted warriors, seasoned sergeants, hardened commanders. Manpower famine triggered logistical implosion. Army spine fractured beneath senseless urban chaos. Left. In the heart of a crumbling empire, a nightmare unfolds. The Kremlin's audacious order locks away Russia's youth, sealing their fate in a country ravaged by desperation. Young men aged 18 to 30 are trapped, their futures extinguished in an act cloaked in secrecy, a mobilization scheme that devours the very essence of a generation. But what horror could provoke such madness? As news of the order spreads, fear grips the nation from Moscow's sprawling avenues to Vladivostok's distant shores. This is no mere travel ban, it is an insidious abduction of hope. The mastermind behind this chaos, Ukrainian military intelligence chief Kirill Budanov, revealed a chilling truth: the Kremlin seeks to funnel 2 million youths into the gaping maw of war. The borders are a trap, a dread-filled cage to ensnare the future of a nation. The breaking point came in September 2022, when Putin's facade of control shattered. The call for 300,000 reservists marked a catastrophic turning point. Families became fugitives, fleeing to save their sons from a war that invaded their homes. What began as a timid exodus transformed into a historic wave, as hundreds of thousands raced for safety, leaving their lives behind. Now, in the chaos of 2023 and 2024, Russia's combat losses mount. Those ill-prepared conscripts fight on the front lines in urban hellscapes, decimated by fierce resistance. Each victory is Pyrrhic, every inch gained a grave for the young, their lives extinguished not for glory but for the delusions of power. The remnants of a professional force lie beneath the rubble, replaced by a hollow shell devoid of experience and spirit. But why, amidst this turmoil, does the Kremlin envision a final reckoning, calling for 2 million to face the battlefield? As military fronts crumble, so too do its institutions. The harsh truth emerges: the world's second army is no longer a mighty force. It is dissolved in the blood-soaked fields of Ukraine, with strategic blunders leading to systemic collapse. In a desperate bid for reinforcement, foreign mercenaries are sought, a reflection of a superpower crumbling under the weight of its ambitions. On October 15, 2025, a law enables an unprecedented mobilization, transforming young men into state property soldiers. A sinister decree that snuffs out the lights of life and opportunity, turning the everyday into a nightmare. The cries for freedom echo against the walls of St. Petersburg, a city rebelling against its destiny. The haunting notes of Swan Lake rise above the chaos, a defiant symphony against tyranny, reminding the Kremlin that any dream of empire can spiral into oblivion. This isn't merely a solitary act of violence, it's the orchestration of destruction. 2 million young souls, doctors, innovators, artists, are sacrificed for momentary survival. This strategic blunder doesn't just ruin the present, it annihilates the foundation of Russia's future. Whether victory comes in Ukraine or not, the nation faces decades in the shadows of recovery, a dark path paved with regret and loss. The Kremlin's frantic grasp to maintain control unravels in real time, leading its own people toward civil strife. What will remain of a country that marches its youth to war? As the beat of rebellion thrums against the Kremlin's door, the question lingers, will the hope for a brighter tomorrow shatter the chains of a tyrant's greed? In the silence between each note, the answer whispers through the streets, resonating with the soul's yearning for freedom. Imagine this: what if the mighty bear of Russia suddenly turned on its own cubs, trapping them in a cage of fear and fury? In the last 48 hours, borders slammed shut across the nation, from icy ports to bustling airports, locking in every young man aged 18 to 30. No escapes. No mercy. This isn't protection, it's a desperate grab, holding an entire generation hostage as the Kremlin's war machine gasps for fresh blood. Shocking, right? A leader caging his people's future, but why now? Buckle up, the storm's just breaking. The holiday cheer fades into dread. With him, Vladimir Putin, at the helm, promises of great victories ring hollow. Hurrah? More like a hollow echo. Get by? Survive if you can. But this cry isn't joy, it's survival. Not a drill. No, this is the raw, savage howl of a crumbling empire on its last legs. Picture the tension thickening like fog over Moscow's red walls. Within those 48 frantic hours, the Kremlin's iron order rippled out, to every border post, every runway, every dock in the vast Russian Federation. Clear. Unyielding. Young men, 18 to 30, barred from leaving. Until further notice? That's code for forever, in this mad game. But it's deeper than a ban. It's a mass kidnapping, snatching a whole generation, the nation's beating heart, its tomorrow, and chaining them to the front lines. Putin didn't just close doors, he slammed prisons on his own youth. Why this frenzy? This unraveling? The spark? A chilling revelation from Kirill Budanov, Ukraine's sharp-eyed intelligence chief. He laid it bare: under the veil of partial mobilization, the Kremlin drafted exactly 2 million youths and reservists. Cannon fodder for the grinding meat grinder in Ukraine. Borders sealed? A sly trap, stopping Russia's dreams from bolting free. Fear explodes like thunder across the land, from Moscow's glittering spires to Vladivostok's rugged shores. Hues snake for miles, hearts pounding in the chill night air. Yet this panic? Not power. It's the Kremlin's suicide scrawl, fanning flames of revolt born from terror, desperate dashes, and utter despair. That fire? It'll topple the throne. Putin's boldest bet crashed hard. This bedlam, this hostage horror, it didn't erupt in a flash. 3 years of war brewed it, blunders piling like snowdrifts, lies seeping like poison into every home. Drop by drop, until the body convulses. To grasp how Russia's lifeblood, its soldiers, dwindled to dust, trace the fractures. First shatter, September 2022. The partial mobilization bombshell. Putin blinked, the smooth war facade cracked. He summoned 300,000 reservists. That instant? The unspoken pact between rulers and ruled shattered like glass under boot. War leaped from screens into living rooms. Danger at every threshold. Russians roared back fiercer than expected. Exodus on epic scale, hundreds of thousands, some whisper near 1 million, snatched passports, revved engines, crammed flights. Kilometer-long lines choked Georgia's borders, horns blaring. Imagine a nation gripped by terror, where frontiers slam shut like iron jaws, and escape becomes a mirage. Young men aged 18 to 30 find their passports worthless, their finances paralyzed in digital chains, and their drivers' privileges snatched away. This isn't mere policy, it's a barbaric edict enslaving an entire generation, chaining their limbs and dreams to the whims of power. How long until this shadow creeps into your own life, seizing you from the comfort of classes or work to hurl you into the mire of senseless slaughter? War looms like a spectral executioner, poised to shatter your world without warning. One moment, you're scribbling notes in a hushed lecture hall, the air thick with chalk dust and whispered hopes. The next, you're yanked from your desk, boots sinking into the slick, reeking mud of Ukrainian slaygrounds, where the stench of decay clings like a shroud. This isn't battle, it's annihilation, stripping lives for a phantom victory. Yet, from this abyss rises a defiant anthem, the haunting strains of Swan Lake echoing through St. Petersburg's cobblestone streets, a melody twisted into rebellion. Unlike the 2022 outcries, moral pleas against distant horrors, this chorus screams for survival, a visceral fight against erasure. By crooning those operatic notes, these youths hurl a searing indictment at the regime's overlords. Why chant Swan Lake? Because it symbolizes the downfall of empires, a reminder that overreach crumbles like weathered statues. If leaders dare resurrect a shattered Soviet dream by feeding us to the flames, we'll invoke the chaos that unraveled it, 1991's upheaval. Born from the same oblivious arrogance. St. Petersburg, that European vista and birthplace of revolutions, pulses with the regime's progeny, the sharpest minds, worldly visions, and history's echoes. They're the vanguard refusing to march as cannon fodder for a tyrant's delusions. Picture this flashback, on a frigid April 16, 2025, amid the city's metallic rumble of trams and faint perfume of blooming lindens, recruiters slunk like predators, ambushing campuses, factories, and subway platforms. Families huddled in dim kitchens, their palms damp with fear, bartering for doctored exemptions, while sons vanished into fog-shrouded forests or crumbling shanties, the crackle of twigs and musty earth their only sanctuary. That terror foreshadowed today's siege, yet now corridors seal fast. A handful slipped through, the rest languish as captives in their homeland. Feel the regime's iron grip tightening? As it drafts 2 million into oblivion, it fractures not just battle lines but Russia's very fabric, a self-inflicted wound that humiliates the once mighty, reducing a superpower to scavenging mercenaries from distant wastelands. What if this chokehold sparks the regime's ultimate undoing? In the heart of a crumbling empire, a terrifying saga unfolds, sealing the fates of Russia's youth in a nation drowning in despair. Young men aged 18 to 30 find themselves ensnared under an audacious Kremlin order. This is not a mere restriction on travel, it is an insidious operation that extinguishes the hopes of an entire generation. As the chilling news spreads from the grand avenues of Moscow to the distant shores of Vladivostok, fear tightens its grip across the nation. But what has triggered such madness? The mastermind of this chaos, Ukrainian military intelligence chief Kirill Budanov, disclosed a dark secret, the Kremlin's plan to funnel 2 million young men into the war machine, a foray that threatens to consume the very essence of a generation. The borders of Russia serve as a grim cage, trapping its future within. The breaking point arrived in September 2022, a day that shattered the Kremlin's facade of control. The call for 300,000 reservists marked a catastrophic shift, transforming families into fugitives desperately seeking to protect their sons from an incursion that invaded their very homes. What began as a nervous exodus evolved into a staggering historic wave, with hundreds of thousands racing for safety, leaving their lives behind in a stampede toward freedom. Fast forward to the chaos of 2023 and 2024, and the human cost mounts exponentially. Ill-prepared conscripts, flung onto the blood-soaked urban battlefields, face fierce resistance. Every so-called victory is a Pyrrhic one, every inch gained, a grave carved for the young. Perishing not in honor but for fleeting illusions of power. The remnants of a once stalwart fighting force lie buried under the rubble, replaced by a hollow collection of inexperienced recruits, merely cannon fodder. But as this turmoil ensues, why does the Kremlin entertain the audacity to call upon 2 million to march into the fray? The answer bubbles up from the depths of despair, the reality that the world's second-largest army has dwindled, disintegrating in the unforgiving soils of Ukraine. Once a formidable power, it now seeks foreign mercenaries, showcasing a beggar's desperation for soldiers drawn from poorer nations. On October 15, 2025, an ominous law was passed, granting the Kremlin and military leaders unrestrained power to mobilize an unprecedented 2 million youths, transforming average young men into pawns of state. This draconian decree robs generations of their rights, turning vibrant futures into nightmares filled with dread. From the streets of St. Petersburg arises a defiant symphony, the haunting notes of Swan Lake, echoing against the oppressive walls of tyranny. In this melancholic rebellion, a relentless reminder surfaces: dreams of empire can twist into dust. This scenario isn't simply a violent act, it embodies the orchestration of national destruction. 2 million souls, doctors, visionaries, artists, sacrificed on the altar of fleeting power, radiating a harbinger of devastation that overwhelms the nation's future. Whether a victory materializes in Ukraine or not, the inexorable repercussions loom, decades submerged in darkness, a bleak path marred by regret. As the Kremlin frantically attempts to maintain its grip, the consequences for its own people inch toward civil strife. What remains of a country that marches its youth off to feudal wars? As the rhythms of rebellion pulse against the Kremlin's door, a poignant question arises: will the quest for a brighter tomorrow sever the chains of a tyrant's avarice? In the stillness between each resounding note, an answer whispers through the streets, mingling with the collective yearning for freedom. As the truth unfolds, the Russian economy teeters precariously on the brink of collapse. The departure of 2 million young professionals from factories, fields, and offices sends shockwaves that threaten not only the present but also any hope for innovation and growth. This moment signifies the last desperate gasp of a monarch engaging in self-destructive strategy, each calculated move deepening the impending disaster. The revelation that Budanov exposed the Kremlin's secret plan before any action was taken showcases an unforeseen stroke of genius, unraveling the strings of authority that bind the people in fear of their own government. In this turbulent sea, how long before the tide turns against the Kremlin's madness? What will emerge from the ashes of loss and longing? As the repercussions of this chaotic mobilization continue to unfold, the stage is set for a transformation that may usher in new choices. The confrontation between burgeoning rebellion and oppressive power looms ever closer. The choices made in these critical days will shape the destiny not only of a nation but of an entire generation facing the shadows of looming despair.